do you help in refining, not defining, like it comes as a draft, but refining contracts
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make it higher probability of succeed?
Yeah, we actually one of the reasons folks come to us is because they want to understand where they are because they don't have market data. And so they will give us their
Yeah.
contracts and they will get a report on many of those points that will slow down. They're slowing down their contracts. And we'll give them quite extensive feedback. That report is actually very valuable. And that's one of the many reasons customers come to us. And then we talk through whether they're happy with the outcome. They like being vendor favorable, market standard, or customer favorable, depending where they are. And there's sort of shades of gray in every category. And then they think through how, if they improve their positioning, what it will entail. And then they start experimenting how much less friction and more revenue they're getting sooner. And they get real sort of backed up by numbers what it means to have unfair terms, what it means to not be market standard. And it turns out when you start measuring and actively changing your contracts and doing A/B testing,
On the contract?
yeah, on the contract, then,
That's interesting.
right? See, it's interesting because you're used to that term in marketing. You are testing your campaigns to see what resonates. Why wouldn't you do the same thing with a contract?
That's an eye opener.
Why wouldn't you do it? Because if you know that a slightly different position will move it faster, if you have that data, then that's not a legal conversation only. Now it's a objective conversation where everyone can be part of it.
Exactly.
And we collectively can decide what makes sense. So yes, we will give you a report. We'll work with you to get you to where you want to be. And we find it's really, really interesting. We find customers that in the end of the day, they like being right in the middle. They like being market standard. And they defend that position vigorously. Some of the top players in the industry do that. And that's because they maybe say, for example, in marketing tech, and marketing, because it relates to data and privacy, there's quite a lot of risks. And so they're very intentional about what the risks they're taking with their customers and what they're going to be defending and what is the outcomes of all that. And they are happy to defend their sort of market position. Why? Because they will stand behind their product, because they will be complying with GDPR, CCPA, and all of those things. On the other hand, in other industries, you'll see players to say, oh, we'll actually take a more customer favorable position because we would rather either cover the risks or we don't think the risks are big enough. We're happy to take that risk. And we will give them sort of not just market standard, but a favorable position in order to get to revenue faster. There's nothing wrong with being market standard. There's nothing wrong with being customer favorable. There's frankly nothing wrong with being vendor friendly, provided that you are making those decisions intentionally based on data after you tested, after you've thought about what you're going to defend, where you stand, how much risk you want to take, and everybody's part of that conversation.
Yes, true. I have also seen a situation like, because technology is changing every now and then, like every 6 months, whatever you are on today, you have to upgrade by technology, by product, or by services, features, whatever it is. So what I have seen is like when a company onboards a solution, okay, with a contract and everything, like it starts working. 6 months down the line, one year or 2 years down the line, like when customer wants to upgrade their solution, okay, and they go to vendor like, hey, your integration is outdated now because we want this feature to be working, and vendor says, hey, I upgraded our service now. In order to make it work, you need to buy additional license, or you got to buy extra dollars to upgrade your service, so you are unable to do that. So it wasn't clear in the original contract. I mean, is uh, it is something like I have seen as a problem, because companies, both customers and vendors, transform over time, and contracts are usually a year or longer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think you touched on a couple of things. One is clarity of contracts, and that actually one of the things we disclose in addition to landmines or risk and favorability or market standard. We also disclose clarity of contracts. We actually measure and give you sort of an objective measure. And we do find that contracts that are actually clear, people can understand, are much more likely to lead to easier renewals, to easier conversations, to more managed expectations, to better experiences. So that's actually clarity is one of the things we measure for sure. What happens at renewal after the vendor or the customer bought the product and things have changed, and how that change is handled, say at renewal or sooner, is actually a really interesting question, because we now increasingly see product cycles that are shorter than a year, meaning shorter than your fiscal year. And so that's why some of the companies, this is not a majority trend yet, are moving toward dynamic finance. Because as you can imagine, if you are having an annual budget and a product cycle changes, say, every 6 to 9 months, your budget is outdated on day, I don't know, 5.
Yeah.
And as you said, well, contracts also, if they're usually a year or more, even if they're months to months, they're usually annual. Should we not think about contracts in a more dynamic way? Because the reality, the product cycles are, in some industries, are increasingly 6 to 9 months. That's a really good question. And I would say the world is moving toward this more dynamic finance, budget planning, and frankly, legal needs to do the same. Legal documents, legal structure need to become dynamic. And I will say to you, if you start looking at contracts, not just like a bunch of words, but more like structured data, you're far more likely to get to that dynamic world and to keep up with it.
Yeah, you have opened a floodgate in my brain right now, like by giving that A/B testing ideas on the legal contracts. As I'm seeing, like just right now, you're saying like continuous improvement of contracts, not just like year by year. It has to be like, because with customers, vendors need to understand like how their roadmap looks like and what's coming up on their objectives, so that they can align their service with them and they can start structuring their contract terms before the renewals happen, as you say. And so there are no surprises later on. And because if surprises come up, then like, of course, satisfaction affects, customer experience goes down, and then obviously it can go at risk of churn at some point. So yeah, proactive understanding of customers vision, aligning vendors own strategy to that, can help the long way.
Yes, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think marketers should care about contracts, because I joke that, look, every company has its terms and conditions. You go
Nobody
to their
reads.
well, let's think about it. You have a front page where you put a lot of resources. And then you go to the legal page, and it's sort of in direct contrast to everything else you have on your website. And it's true that very few people sort of get up in the morning and say, I want to read some contracts. That doesn't usually happen. But nonetheless, I would say contract page is actually kind of like pricing page. People who open it, they raise their hand that they're interested in your product. It's not a volume place, but it's a place where
It's a soft lead for marketing too.
That's my point. I don't actually think it's a pretty. If you are so committed that you read a contract, I don't think you're a soft lead.
Yes.
You actually a highly committed lead at that point, right? It's like the highest hand you can raise, and so that's why we see our customers display our badge right next to G2, for example, because it communicates to a prospect, a highly committed prospect, kind of like G2 communicates that they're leader in their field, they have good services and products. The badge, the Term Scout badge, communicates that we're going to be trustworthy and easy to deal with, and you're gonna know what's in the contract by the first picture. And that's important. And so I actually think just like pricing is an opportunity to really optimize marketing and testing it, I would say contracts are as well. It's, again, not because it's a volume play, but because people who choose to go there, they're highly committed to the product and they probably already like pricing. Wouldn't you want to increase conversion rate there much more? Wouldn't you want to communicate trust and transparency? Wouldn't you want to communicate that you're easy to deal with?
Yes,
Wouldn't you
yes, yes,
want to
yes, yes.
communicate that you are better than your competitors, whether or not they're differentiated or not, because you offer all that? That's why I really point out to marketing teams that terms and conditions is a missed opportunity almost on every webpage I visit. You invest so much in this like glorious first page and then nothing in terms and conditions. You probably never even looked at it. And I think it's a missed opportunity not to communicate things that will convert your customers.
I was always under the impression those pages are purposely meant to be boring
Yeah, but if you talk to
because they
in
don't want you to read it.
yes and no, because if you're a committed customer, you probably will.
But they should not think that way.
Right, exactly. Because if when I talk to enlightened marketing leaders, they will tell me that pricing is the most visited page. And
Okay.
they optimize it because pricing page highly correlate. The only reason you're interested in pricing is because you're considering buying.
Yes, exactly. You are like later in the
Well, the
decision
only
phase.
reason you're reading a contract is because you're probably even further along. If you're reading a contract, that usually means you like the product and the price is about right.
Yes.
So you are even more committed if you're reading a contract.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you want to communicate trust and optimize that page?
That's right. Now I'm thinking of two things to bring up with you. Now, one is about B2B, where prices are not upfront. Mostly with large enterprises, prices are not really like visible upfront. It comes later in the decision journey with customers. But before even that, I want to discuss about the uh, the the change management from like traditional way of managing contracts to the new technology driven contract management like term scout is offering. Is there a learning curve or is there a training requirement to enable uh, inside company teams to be at that level for managing contracts digitally?
We are not thinking about contracts as contract management. We're focusing on B2B contracts as a tool to manage revenue.
Okay.
And that's a very important distinction because if you're just focusing on managing contracts from in life cycle of a contract, you're focusing on optimizing negotiations.
Yes.
But
That's part of it. Yeah.
if you're focusing on the revenue and the structured data of it, then you really zero in on the fact that contracts are a tool to increase value of the company through revenue. And how you balance risks and what you put in it will impact the friction. So we are focused on the impact of revenue and managing that through structured data so that conversations with your peers in your company are not about negotiations and optimizing the joy of every stage of that, but how you get to revenue sooner without impact.